Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, host of the Riderflex podcast and founder and CEO of our day job recruiting firm, Riderflex. We hope you enjoy this episode. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the podcast for updates and news. If you haven't already, check out the series of books we've published on hiring, interviewing, and overall career advice titled The Riderflex Guide. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Class 6 Partners. Are you ready to sell your business or raise capital? Class 6 Partners guides you through the entire process, from business optimization to securing the perfect deal. With over $3 billion in transactions, they turn your business dreams into reality. Visit class6partners.com to start your journey today. Skylar, welcome to the Riderflex podcast, man.
I appreciate it, Steve. Good to be here.
First question is, how old are you? Because you look like you're 22.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I am a balmy 32. I feel every day of that. I just had my first daughter, so we're in that phase of
Oh,
life right now.
oh,
So
cool. How old is she?
yeah. She is 6 weeks on Friday. So, well, two
Oh,
days from now, whenever this airs, but she's about 6 weeks right now. So we are, yeah, we're in the thick of it.
all right. Very good. Your first kid, huh?
First one. Yep.
Pretty special, isn't it?
It's, I mean, it's everything that people say. It's hard to talk about kids at this age without feeling really cliche. But what I will say, and maybe a takeaway, is that I don't know why, as a society, we tend to gravitate towards all the negatives of kids. Like, even when we were pregnant, everybody's feedback was always about, they're going to drive you up a wall, or you're not going to get any sleep, and whatever else. And like, some of that is true, but it's insignificant to just, I walked out of a meeting a couple hours ago and I just walked into her nursery, and like, it makes your day, right? So like, we could also start to talk about some of the positives maybe a little bit more. The sleep is sleep, right? We'll catch up on that at some point.
I mean, it's really the whole, I mean, not to get too philosophical, but I mean, we are here to keep the society going, right? I mean, if we don't have kids, human beings eventually deplete off of the planet, don't they? I mean, I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Yeah, I got to be careful with this one but I do believe, and again, this is a completely personal opinion, it has nothing to do with my business or anything else, but um, you know, a lot of folks search for meaning or have frustrations around fulfillment. I think you can simplify a lot of that if you have some children, right? Like
I totally
what
agree.
we deal with in the professional setting is so insignificant to
Yes.
procreation. I mean, we're animal, right? I do believe that to some
Yep.
extent. And
Yep. Yep. Yep.
so I very much resonate with what you just said, for sure.
Tell you a quick funny story real quick about kids, and then we can move on. I want to ask about your wife too, but so all four of ours are grown. Mine are 35 to 30 now, your age. Um, but I will tell you, when they're gone, it's weird. So you're entering a wonderful time of life. I would encourage you to enjoy every single minute because believe it or not, it does kind of go faster than you realize. Like
Mm.
before you know it, you're like, oh fuck, okay, I guess I'm 50 and all of my kids are gone now. It's okay. And so then and it happens really fast where you're sitting on the couch one evening having your cocktail for the evening, trying to relax, and it's very quiet, and all you
Mm.
can hear is the clock on the wall, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, now what do I do?
Totally. Yeah.
So,
I Yeah,
uh,
we're it's interesting. Like, everybody says enjoy every moment. And so I don't know. I'll be honest with you, man. I don't know how to do that other than just, I do spend, it sounds silly, but like last night I was holding her and I just stared at her for like 5 minutes. I didn't say anything. I didn't talk. There's no phone, there's no device,
uh,
being pretty intentional about that. But I was
that's
like,
good.
well, maybe this is what people are talking about. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how long you been married?
Been married for 4 years now. But I've known my wife. We've been together for 11 years.
Okay. All right.
We met in school. We met in our master's program in Spain, and
Oh, oh, is she from there or where's she from?
she's actually from Russia.
Oh, cool.
Grew up in the UK, and then did Spain, kind of like me. Went there for a master's degree, and we
All right.
met like first day of class, and it was the Disney story of romance or whatever. So
Does she speak
uh
Russian and Spanish, Russian, English? What else?
yep, Spanish, Russian, English. To my knowledge, that's it, unless she's a spy. And then she
Which
might
she
be
could be.
speaking. She still could be. I could be. We never know.
Uh,
But no, it's funny. Like we are pretty passionate about trying to raise our children at least bilingual, hopefully trilingual, right?
oh,
That
for
allows them
sure.
to talk to
Yeah.
her family, at a more sophisticated level, and also just
Right.
good for business opportunities, certainly, as you get
Oh,
older.
no. Yeah, no doubt. How does a Colorado kid decide to go to Michigan? Why'd you go to Michigan? Just curious.
Oh yeah, we should talk about this for an hour.
Eh.
That one's easy. Like my family's from Michigan.
Oh,
My
okay.
parents met at a football game at Michigan like freshman year. And
I
so
see.
I grew up diehard Michigan
I see.
fan.
I see.
And it actually wasn't my top choice, but it was a no-brainer when I was evaluating schools. And I mean, we went through 20 years of being a tough watch on the football side of things. And then last year was vindication for everything.
All
So
right. All right.
it's all
Yeah.
worth it, right?
Well, you weren't there, were you? For the
No,
win. Yeah.
no, unfortunately. No, I couldn't swing that
Still.
one.
But still, you went to some of the games.
Yeah, I mean, definitely I've been to a lot of games. I've been back a couple times. I mean, if you ever have a chance to go, and this applies to a lot of these big state schools, like there's nothing like football Saturday. The South does it slightly differently than the North, but Ann Arbor on a Saturday is absolutely worth seeing, right?
Yeah.
It's an entire community out doing something together, which we struggle with, I think, in America frequently.
Good point.
So we go back, but a lot of times we don't even go to the game, right? I don't. I have an opinion that football is better watched on TV.
Yeah.
Just my opinion, So, but yeah, we've gone there. We went to Ohio State like 6 years in a row. Watched us lose every year. So we've traveled to a couple. We've been through some stuff here.
So were you a good kid? Were you a rebel? You must have you had pretty good grades to get into Michigan. So I'm guessing you're a pretty good kid. But anything in Colorado high school you want to share? Anything you want to confess about, Skylar?
I think I was a pretty like in retrospect, the trouble that I got in was not bad. No, I was a it's so funny. My parents were cleaning up, they're like remodeling or something. They're cleaning up the house and they're showing me all this schoolwork. And I'll tell you, like as a kid, I was focused on one thing growing up, and that was just playing sports. Like I
Okay.
wanted to play sports. If you read my elementary schoolwork, whether it was a writing assignment, a math assignment, anything that was creative, it was all like, or we had a diary. Everything was just an update about hockey practice or soccer practice.
Okay.
I cared
Okay.
about almost nothing else, and the team sports kept me out of a lot. I was so busy with that stuff. And I did have good grades. I went to George Washington here in Denver,
Okay.
an
All
IB
right.
program, and
All right.
good academics for sure. But school was secondary to sports for me for a while. And, my
Well,
work ethic in the school setting really came from Michigan because I could not keep up without really applying myself for the first time. And that was good. That was a very humbling experience for sure.
even majoring in political science, it was tough.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. That's a fair shot. Yeah, the liberal arts. So funny you bring that up. No, I didn't struggle in the liberal arts coursework. I wanted to be an econ major,
Oh,
and my math background was just nowhere near sophisticated enough. So I was taking some higher level econ courses, trying harder than I ever have before, and I was getting C's, and I'd never got a C in my entire life. And that's when I remember talking to my dad. He's like, "Well, maybe this is not for you, buddy." Like, so you know, then I thought maybe I
uh,
can get into politics, and I did some lobbying internship for a
oh,
summer and
oh,
found out
all right.
how it's as scummy as you would expect it to be. So
I
I
would
kind
think
of
so. Yeah, I would think.
yeah, I got out of that one, and
What'd your dad do, or what'd your mom and dad do?
Yeah, mom was in finance, dad's an architect, and
Okay.
it's interesting like you bring that up because I think like both influence how I view business now and in a beautiful way. Like I think, on the financial side, it's pretty clear, right? Like you get a lot of mathematical analysis, but my mom also was client facing, right? So there's a lot of empathy for clients, client facing work.
Okay.
But my dad was a sports architect. So he designed big arenas, football
Oh,
stadiums, things like that
I
before he
see.
transitioned. And architecture, whether I realized it or not, it really caused an emphasis on good design, on like paying attention to specific details. And in the software world, and especially in the HR software world where I play,
Mm,
good design matters a tremendous amount. And
mm,
so
mm,
it's
mm.
interesting you brought that up. I've never really shared that before, but that really was kind of ingrained into me, not like overtly, but just by nature of being around it, has benefited me a lot, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like you're still close to your folks too.
Yeah, close to them. I mean, I have a strong personality. I appreciate them dealing with me. We'll just leave it at that.
Well, most CEOs usually have a pretty strong personality.
Totally.
Most of them aren't passive, super soft teddy bears.
Totally. Yeah, that would apply. That would apply.
So your wife puts up with you too, basically, is what you're
She
saying.
does. She does. And she does a great job. We balance each other, obviously, but you know, she's also seen the progression, right? Like I started my career betting kind of on myself, and I worked in a very small company. I was the first employee, and I took a much lower salary with some equity because I had a chip on my shoulder. Right? I basically failed out of that econ coursework. I wanted to be a consultant after business school in Spain, and none of the consulting firms wanted to hire me. And there's a lot of rejection in some formative years that I just needed an environment where I felt like I could let my talent shine, that I felt like I possessed. And I was lucky to meet a couple guys that um, didn't necessarily care what was on my resume. They just cared about output, and then it was about work ethic, right? And like what you can produce early on. And that,
Was this Wade and uh
yep,
what's the other
Wade and
guy?
Andreas.
Yeah, that's right. Wade and Andreas. Yeah, I did some homework on that. Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you meet them?
Yes. So they both went to the same school in Spain, but
Ah,
Andreas was a strategy consultant. So Andreas is from Germany and they met in school a couple years. They were a couple years before me, but
I see.
um, Wade was an iBanker in his earlier years, but Andreas was in strategy consulting, and that's where I wanted to work.
I
So
see. I see.
if you know about like strategy consulting, there's a pretty formal interviewing process that you have to go through with cases. And I was preparing for these, and so I was networking with some folks, and we got introduced by one of their classmates. And
Okay.
I asked Andreas like if he had any advice and maybe if he could help me get into the industry. And he said he'd help me prepare for the cases or whatever. And in a very Andreas fashion, said, "Hey, we've got something that we just started. You want to take a peek?" And it was like a long con to get me to work there.
To
And
work for free. A long con to work for free at first.
yeah, I mean, well, it was, I think I was making like $12 an hour at the beginning. And, but it was on projects that, they were pre-product, pre-revenue. So we were doing, I was helping them build investor decks. So I was researching TAM, or I was trying to figure
this
out what the CAGR was of the market that we were playing in. And dude, these are all things that it was like, oh, that's strategy work, right? Like, is that what working in a startup is? Like, that sounds pretty cool. We should do
this
that.
this was ThrivePass, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. So that was
Yeah.
early. That was, around December 2014. So the product was in like a dev shop. We didn't have any customers, and we were doing a lot of that early work. And then,
What great experience for you. Just that
unbelievable.
yeah, that just there's so many learning lessons in that early phase, those early phases right there. I mean, wow. I mean, I
Yeah,
mean, you're getting your doctorate in startup, basically.
I couldn't agree more. And I tell people, and this is an unpopular opinion, and even with my friends that I know from college or high school, people ask me my thoughts a lot about MBAs. And
Yeah.
I would say if you can go find the right working environment, dude, I got my MBA 6 times and I didn't pay anything for it. And I got paid to get
Yeah,
it, right? Like
exactly.
what better experience than
Oh
to
man.
do it yourself?
Yes,
So
yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
agreed, right? And that's what drove me. I didn't care about the title or the salary early on. I just wanted to learn.
And
And
functionally, what was your specialty? Functionally, was it ops? Was it sales? Was it what was your lane, so to speak? Of course, I know at that size you're wearing all kinds of hats, I guess.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I'm
yeah,
cracking up because like if you looked at my dude, I was a political scientist, so like I knew how to write and I guess think and I could talk, but I didn't have like a background that you could justify putting me into these roles. But what I
yeah.
ended up settling into, and you're right, in the early days, in the first year, I did almost everything, and that I will say was hugely important because as we grew and hired,
Yep. You
I
knew the
would
job. You're like, hey man, I've done that.
100%. And you had all this like trust and authority with the team. And
Yeah.
then my age became completely irrelevant. I
Right.
was
Doesn't matter.
22
Yeah.
and we were, I was the youngest kid at that firm for 10 years, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years or however long. But it didn't matter, right? Like because I had
Yeah.
sat in that seat and I had built a lot of those processes. And so anyway, to answer your question directly, it was ops and product. It really swung into product mostly. So I was
Okay.
managing our engineering team. And then because of deep product knowledge, where you really understood like what was built, what our roadmap was, and then what we could kind of feasibly accomplish if we needed to stretch, I moved into sales.
Okay. And of course your leadership skills were there probably from the beginning. I mean, you obviously had natural leadership, and now I'm sure it's matured and I'm sure it's been polished and continues to be polished. But I'm just assuming even when you were in high school and you played sports, you were probably in a leadership role pretty often. I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's fair, certainly. I think part of it's like innate personality. I can't really explain it. You can probably tell by the way I talk. I have self-assurance, but I also feel like I have self-awareness. I know
Good.
with pretty good certainty where I have weak spots, and then I also feel like I know where I'm strong, and I'm not afraid to share either one. I have no problem being vulnerable.
That's
I
good.
do think also, as I progressed, what I realized was a real strength of mine. I'm very passionate, and
Okay.
people are attracted to passionate people.
Good.
And
Yeah.
and that requires me to be in a seat where I feel something, right? I would never do a job to get a paycheck. It's just not, you could feel it, right? In a negative way. But when it's positive, I think the opposite occurs, right? And people can kind of feel that. And that's very attractive, I think, for some people that aren't as comfortable leading or want to be kind of drawn to something. So that's really helped me in my career. And
That's
I'll
good.
tell you, and if Andreas is listening to this, there was a lot of walks we would take along the Boulder Creek because Skylar had a freak out and he didn't handle himself properly. So there's a lot of credit to the people that I was around to essentially figure out how to channel what was like some pretty raw talent early on. Um,
Let's take a pause right there. This might be the highlight clip of this show. When I think I'm 57 now, but when I think back about my career and I was thrust into leadership roles late 20s, early 30s, kind of like you. Um, and I was a CEO by 40, which is still young, not nearly as young as you, but gosh, when I think back, Skylar, how many times I should have been fired for something or I did something just completely ridiculous. And I had mentors who just said, gave me a chance, basically just looked at me and said, okay, this kid's got potential.
yep.
He fucked up. Let's just put some more investment and time in him and dust him off because there's something here. Thank God for those people
Totally.
because there's so many times. I was just telling somebody the other day when I was a district manager for retail. Just tell you how old I am. I used to be a district manager for music stores back when you had to drive to a store and buy music.
Yeah.
Anyway, as a district manager for retail, like there was one time where got in a physical punching match in the parking lot of a bar with one of my store managers who worked for me because we're at the bar. If we go outside and fight, bloody each other up, and then we just kind of stop and go back in the bar and start drinking again. And then like
Yeah.
the next morning in the hotel lobby, the executives are looking at us like, what the fuck? Like, what happened? And he didn't say anything. I don't say anything. But of course, and I'm thinking it's shit like that I did back
Yep.
then. There's so many stories. So
Totally.
my point is to your point, thank God for mentors that give younger professionals a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if I would assume it's the same for you, but like, for me, especially now when I look at, regardless of age, right? When I just look at employees that I feel like have extraordinary potential, it's all about like, do they have some of the core?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
do they care? Are they
Do they care?
passionate? Do,
Yep.
do do they
Yep.
work hard? Like, do they want to win? Those are all things that matter deeply to me. And the other stuff, I can let's coach, let's at least give them a chance, right? You
Sure.
can't screw up in the same, the other thing was like I tried not to make the same mistake multiple times.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always the case, right? Like I had to learn a lot about managing my emotions and I still can get hot for sure. And it comes from the passion, right, that I've talked
Sure.
about.
Yep. Yep.
But how you do that appropriately and don't let it don't let the perception of that be really negative with the rest of your folks. That's a tough skill, and I think they knew that, right? And they were okay with
That's
because it
cool.
was originating from a place of love out of the organization. There was more patience as opposed to me like actively trying to destroy something or
Yeah.
being cancerous in some regard.
And it paid off because you helped them build the company and now they grabbed you to come do this other thing. But before we go there, did ThrivePass exit? Was there a successful exit there and acquisition? What happened with that? Did it get acquired? Did they sell it? Is it still alive? What's going
Yeah,
on there?
still doing great. Know their CEO well. The original founders are still on the board, still involved there. The product had evolved a lot, and I was still there when they made some horizontal expansions into the product suite, but
Okay.
they're doing great. They're yeah,
But
growing
Andreas and Wade,
nicely.
were they the founders of that?
Correct. Yeah,
And
and Wishlist where I now work. So
right,
ThrivePass,
right,
the
right.
weird kind of cyclical story, but ThrivePass actually spun out of Wishlist where I now work. And
Oh,
so Wishlist was the original company. And then
oh,
when I left ThrivePass, and it was because of some personal circumstances with my wife, we had some visa problems. So I
okay.
stepped back from ThrivePass and then did my own thing. I was consulting and then leadership at Wishlist was changing, so they called me to come work here.
I see. So Wishlist was first, and that was there. That was I see. I got
Yep.
you.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
So you at ThrivePass, you were made it to the VP level or whatever level
Yep.
you were at there. You stepped down. What year was that? 23, I guess. Was that early
I
or
stepped down. So I was running a couple of teams I stepped down in 2019 from managerial duties.
okay?
I still helped out with some more IC work with them that I could do remotely. I mean, we weren't even living in the country. So
I
there was
see.
no way I was going to manage a team from abroad. And then end of 2022 is really, I mean, really middle of 2022 when I started this is when stuff tapered off with ThrivePass.
And you moved back to the US.
Correct. Yeah, I'd moved back in the US because of COVID, and we
Oh,
got married in 2020. So I was back for I've been back for a couple of years.
what a year to get married.
2020. Dude, I got married at a deli counter in like Littleton. We went to like the courthouses weren't even open, so we went to the clerk and register. It was not how they draw it up in like the movies. Let's just say we pulled like a number. We got called over the intercom. Some lady we don't know signed us.
Oh man.
It was something, but it wasn't.
Now, and your wife is thinking Okay, well, this is cool, but what are you going to do for a living?
Yeah. We were renting because we had sold our stuff. We were trying to move to Europe at that point, and we moved into a buddy's apartment that was living in Colombia at the time. And but luckily, everything works out, right? Like mortgage rates were so low, we actually got into the market. We bought our first house that fall.
Was she
So
working? Was she working?
yeah, she's at that point she was running her own business too. So we had a lot of flexibility, like where we could live and work. And
Okay.
she's since gone back in-house and does a little bit on the side, but
Okay. Okay. But she's
yeah.
working. So,
Yep.
all right. So you get into a house, and then are you thinking, okay, I got to go find a job? What was your plan? What was your,
No, I was, man, I'll be honest with you. In 2020 and 2021, I was living the dream. I was working, I don't know, 30 hours a week or something, making more money than I ever had. And all I was doing was I had built a network
I
of
see.
people that I've met over the years.
I see.
A lot of them were early stage entrepreneurs and they needed help, usually on the go-to-market side. So there
Okay.
was some issue with there's this interesting feedback loop between in an early company about like what's the product we're creating or the service packages and then what is the market saying. And so I that's what I did. I bridged that gap for a long time. And so I was consulting with a lot of these people and the entrepreneurs that I was working with were super capable, very interesting, different business
Ah,
models. And
all right.
so I was really a consultant and I was really happy. I was doing some things on my personal side that because I wasn't working as much, and I had no plans on going back, right? But when you're 29 and somebody says, "Hey, do you want to be a CEO?" I remember being like, having a conversation with my wife, like, things are good right now, but this seems
Yeah.
stupid to not hear out. And
Yep, I agree. Yep, yep, yeah.
yeah,
And there's another pause, training tip moment for the listeners. C-level jobs in reality do not come along that often. They just don't. They just don't. I mean, I'm talking about real ones. I'm not talking about you and your buddy started a company. I'm talking,
yep,
I'm talking to the audience. You and your buddy started a company. You call yourself CEO, and he calls himself COO. That's
yeah,
not the same thing. Like a real CEO job of a real team doing a few $1 million a year or more. Like those jobs just aren't out there every day. So if you get a shot at taking one, yeah, you should do it because they just don't come along very often. They
yeah,
really don't. So you did the right,
completely.
yeah, you did the right thing. So they call, so your buddies call you, Wade and Andreas call you, and they're like, hey man, come run this.
Pretty much. And I told him no. I said I'm good. And then then the process of reflection, what you just said, kind of sunk in. And what's interesting is like at that time, I was friendly with the old CEO of Wishlist, and then some of their leadership team, and I
Okay,
think it was just a really so I had heard their perspective on what was going on here, but what I hadn't done was listen to the board's perspective. And
okay,
it's another really good lesson and I think this applies to everything, man. Like there's always two sides to everything. You
sure,
hear you hear the media or somebody say one thing, like please do your best to try to hear the other side of that because only then I think it's appropriate to make a decision. And that I've seen time and time again. So once all the cards were on the table, you start to be able to formulate your own opinion. And then yeah, what you said, right? Like this is such a tremendous opportunity for me to grow personally. And I'll take a quick shot at like Andreas also has known me for so long. Like he knows how to sell to me, right? And like there's an art of, and this in your world, right? There's an
yeah,
art to
yeah,
recruit somebody.
yeah, for sure.
And he said
Uh,
something to the effect of, and it's I like, God damn it, dude. Like, I know what you're doing here, and I can't help but it's effective. Like, he said something like, um, I know you. You're not going to be a consultant forever. You're not going to learn enough. And then he just left it there. And he was right, but I
that's
didn't want
good.
to hear that
Yeah.
at the time. So,
That's good. That's good. Okay, now
yeah.
when you took the job, I don't know how much you can share. What give the so it's your first CEO job, which is a big deal, especially for a young man. The scope of responsibility. Can you give everybody a general idea, like what's the team size, what's the general revenue size? So when just I don't know how much you can share. I know it's a private company, but some general idea of how big this scope of responsibility is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the headcount will kind of give an indication of revenue
Okay.
size, right? So we were, um, when I started, maybe around 20
Okay.
employees.
Okay.
And, one of the big first tasks was, like, listen, every management book is absolutely spot on when they say, like, if you don't have the right people on the bus, you can't drive the bus, right? So
Yeah.
now, as a new CEO, I would have loved to give 6 months of like deep research into our customers and every employee and do all these interviews. But I knew before I started formally because I had met some of the players that I was going to need to completely rebuild the team. And so we turned over in the US office almost 100% of the workforce. So I think
Wow.
we kept
Yeah.
one person, and it was done in phases, of course. And ultimately, I wanted to root out what had become a very apathetic culture. Like, if you can't tell, I am not here. We don't have that long on this planet in general terms, right? So I am not
No.
here to do things half-assed. I am not here to come in second place. Like, I don't see the point in living life that way. And I
Yeah.
needed people that wanted to win. And it doesn't mean like be immoral or be
No.
unethical, but
No.
like, I just never understood why we would be okay with being mediocre. Or like what killed me was like, well, that's the way things have been done. Like that was
Yeah.
the quickest
Oh
way to
my
get
God.
let go.
I love that one. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. So so it was a challenge, man. But like also, and I've talked about this before, but like when you are able to just rebuild from the ground up, it does allow you to put your own spin on everything.
Yeah.
For better or for
Good.
worse, it was very painful, certainly. Like those are long days, but also in the long term was absolutely the right decision, right? Like we've
How
doubled our head
many?
count.
Oh, you don't. So you're at 40, 50 people now, roughly,
Yeah,
somewhere in
about
there.
40 probably.
And is
We
that
float a little bit.
an office in the US and somewhere else too?
Exactly. Yeah. So office here and office in Delhi.
I see. That's why
Yep.
I saw an HR person or something on,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah, we're in a PEO here and then
I see.
which makes sense for our side. I had some relationships in the PEO space, but we have a full-time HR rep in India.
Okay.
There's just a lot of bureaucracy over there. She's very, very helpful. She's awesome. Thank you deeply.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, both teams have grown nicely. There was also a reallocation of resources. Like I thought we were really heavy in some non-value added roles, and to be
okay.
in software, you got to be able to build. So we invested heavily into engineering and added a lot of headcount there, and then the infrastructure that's required to support a big engineering team. So
Okay. And you
it
had
was a
the,
reshape.
I'm guessing you've had the full support of the board. Sounds like.
Like, yes, the board's been awesome. Like they stayed out of the way, and I mean that in a nice way. Like, but I also, I think nobody ever taught me how to manage a board. This is the first board I've ever managed, right? But
Yeah,
I
you took,
approached it as I would approach anything in life. Like these guys deserve to know anything. I don't shield them from anything. Like we've had some hard conversations, and you build trust that way. Like they knew me, but still the same conversations I was having internally, it's not like I was cooking the books or like, in
yeah.
fact, I was probably even more straightforward with them about the reality of the situation. And because of that, they've been incredibly supportive in all decisions, right? And like helping think through things. And um, so yeah, it's been a great learning experience from that regard and also a very supportive relationship for sure.
We could do a whole hour podcast on managing boards.
Totally.
I want to ask you one piece. I want to get, let's give one tip for the listeners on managing boards. But before you go, I'll let you think about your answer. I remember the first board book that I prepared. I don't know if you know about my background. I ran a couple of $40 million companies before starting
Mm.
Riderflex, and so I've been in the chair a little bit. And I remember the first board book I prepared, and I took it to the one of the board members ahead of time to be like, "Hey man, look, is this what do am I ready? Take a look at my board book." I just remember he looks at it he just gets real quiet for a minute or two and he goes, "Yeah, this is shit." And he's like, let me. He's like, "You have no idea what you're doing. Let me teach you how to prepare for a quarterly board meeting." Uh, but wonderful experience, right? I mean, just dealing with all of that. But the one tip I was going to give, and then I want to hear your tip for managing boards. The one thing I learned over the years with boards are there's usually one person on the board that is all that's challenging. And so like you just know, okay, Fred's gonna hammer me with
Yep.
he's gonna have the best questions, he's gonna have the hardest questions, he's gonna do his thing, and so I got to be ready for Fred. Well, what I learned to do, I'm making that name up, but there's a
Yep.
Fred everywhere, right? And what I learned to do was send Fred the board book ahead of time and schedule a one-on-one call the day before the board meeting. And I'd be like, "Hey, Fred, yeah, by the way, I sent you the board book ahead of time. Do you mind maybe you jump on the phone, you get some of your questions out of the way?" And boy, that would just diffuse. Then the meeting would just go so much. Anyway,
That's
I want
great
to hear.
advice.
Yeah, I want to hear yours. What tip do you want to share?
I've got two. One's actually very related to yours.
Okay.
I approach it in a little bit of a different way, but it might build. So I'll leave that one to the end. But one is feedback I got after my second or third board meeting, and it was just maybe this is only helpful for the newer CEOs,
Okay.
but I thought every board meeting I had to say something like remarkably brilliant about like the strategy of the company. And I remember I'm my own worst critic, right? And I was talking to one of my board members afterwards, and he was like, "Yeah, good work. Like I thought that went really well." And I was like, yeah, I don't know." And I'm criticizing myself. He's like, "Listen, these board meetings are basically for you to like prove to the board that you know what you're doing. Like you're kind of interviewing each time. It's not like you don't have to, come up with some brilliant new
Brilliant.
strategy. Just
Yeah,
show that you know what's going on and do nothing more." And it depressurized the way I thought about a lot of subsequent board meetings of like, hey,
that's
this
good.
is really an informational, right?
Right.
Like it's not
Right. It is.
always the
Yeah,
most strategic session. I
that's
thought we
true.
were curing cancer every session. We're not doing anything. I'm not saying anything I haven't said to my leadership team 15 times the last 3 months,
Yeah.
but they haven't been a part of those discussions. So
Yep.
anyway, that was
That's
one
a
thing
good
that I
one.
always remember.
That's a good one. Yep. That's a good tip.
The
What else
other
were you going to
one,
say? Yeah.
yeah, the other one's related to what you said. So what I've found is, I mean, sending the board deck beforehand as far in advance as possible, like brilliant advice for sure. I actually, when I know I need, when I know we're gonna have to make a bigger decision, or when I know there is something that'll substantively shift our strategy or whatever else, I try to get my board involved like off cycle. So I'll say, hey, I want to pick your brain about
Yeah.
X,
There you
Y, or
go.
Z, or hey,
Yeah.
I would love to get your thoughts on this way
Yes.
ahead of the board meeting. So I don't think of the board meeting as the only time I can talk to them. I
Good
let
move.
them tell me if, like, dude, I don't have time for you, but I'm not shy at getting on their calendar in,
Good move.
trying to make them a part of a decision, right? That's effective for managing down too, to be quite honest, right? Like if you can make somebody feel like they're a part of a decision, trust me, your outcome will be much more successful. So
Oh, yeah. Good
that's
stuff.
that's been my philosophy, and we have good rapport to be able to do that, right?
That's a good move. Now, there's so many lessons learned in being a first time CEO, especially a young CEO. We could do it 2 hours probably of all the things you've learned so far. As you reflect now, because you've been doing it for a couple of years, as you reflect now, what do you want to tell anybody listening that's about to step into the chair for the first time? What do you want to share with them? Two or three things where you're like, "Ooh, man, okay, yeah, kind of wish I had known that ahead of time."
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot we could, and
There's
it's like
so much. Yeah.
there's like a lot of things that seem, I think I mean, there's a lot of things that seem trivial that aren't. Like one obvious thing that comes to mind that again, it will sound obvious to a listener, but you'd never really understand until you sit in the seat is that everybody watches you all the time.
Yes.
Like, and that is the pressure. That's where all these sayings come from. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. It's lonely at the top. Like, I think so. Two things that stand out. One is that you have to always remember that you're the only person, with the exception of the board, that has access to the entire data set. So when people on your team have an opinion and it seems misguided or silly, you have to remember that they're coming at it probably defending whatever their narrower scope of
Mm,
focus looks like.
mm.
And approaching those discussions with empathy and also challenging and saying, hey, at some point, and I've said this to people, like, you need to give me the benefit of the doubt. Like, I just know things that you don't know, and I can't share everything with you all the time, but I promise I have your best interest at heart, or however you want to phrase that. That is a skill for sure. And like, I wouldn't say I'm perfect at that, but that's one that
Good advice. Great
I think it's
stuff.
difficult, man. I think it's difficult to get
Great
right.
stuff. Great stuff.
Um, the other one is just and again, it's gonna sound stupid probably to somebody like yourself, but like I didn't realize that a lot of people work here because of me. Like, and we're small, right? We're only 40 employees, but I don't know. I thought like maybe the industry or the job role, and like some of that plays into it. But at the end of the day, the CEO really sets the culture of us,
Big
and
time.
even a mid-sized organization, even a bigger organization. And so
Yep.
that means how you behave, how you show up in meetings, the energy,
Yes.
your framing, your positioning, all of that stuff is scrutinized. And so you have to um, prepare and like take that seriously and think through those things. And it's stressful for sure, but I also view it as a privilege, right? I think that's incredible. Like that people would put their faith in my hands. Like I'm still an idiot on the weekend. Like I don't know. Like I'm still a normal person, but Monday through Friday, I'm not
Uh,
messing around. Like we are here because I know that if we don't perform well, those people's jobs or payrolls at risk or whatever else. So I take that very, very seriously. And
that's where the
that's what
stress
stands
comes.
out.
You know, I want to touch on something here. By the way, yeah, good stuff. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, every move you make is being watched. I mean, that is a good tip for the listeners, and you're not just for CEOs, but anybody entering into a pretty big executive position where you're managing a large team. I mean, everything, everything you do. And one example I will give, I could give a bunch, but if you take Johnny to lunch several times and you haven't taken Mary, and there's Mary's on the marketing team too, or I mean, little tiny stuff like that. People are watching. Oh, well, he takes Johnny to lunch all the time. Johnny's his favorite, or whatever,
You got
right?
it.
And then Mary's like, well, he's never taken me to lunch, or I mean, just everything. They are dissecting your every move.
Yep. Yep.
He acknowledges John in the meetings. He tells John good job in the meetings. He's never told me good job when we're in the conference room.
Totally, man. Totally.
It's all of that, man. Every single thing. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on too. I know a lot of people listening to this episode might think they want to be CEO, but let me tell you, it's not for everybody. It is a very stressful world. I hear people complain about how much money the CEOs make. And yes, some of the money that some of these CEOs make is absurd, but generally, once you've had the pressure and stress of the job, you kind of get it. Like you kind of understand, like, listen, man, and when there's 100 people depending on you not to fuck things up and make good decisions because they're paying their mortgages, they're paying their kids' schooling, they're making their car payments, they're depending on you to make sure this shit's running right and you're managing cash flow properly. That is a lot of pressure, a shit ton of pressure. Oh, and by the
100%,
way,
man.
your wife and kids and stuff at home are also depending on you not to fuck it up.
100%.
It
100%.
is a lot of stress, and I've had that conversation so many times on this show and with people. I will tell them, I'm like, listen, man, until you've lived being a CEO or being an entrepreneur, owning a business, until you've lived it, it is hard for me to describe to you the amount of pressure that is involved.
Totally agree. Yeah, and I was one of those employees that thought he could do it better. And like until you sit in the seat, you don't
Oof, man.
know. And I also I think there's a lot to be said about not throwing stones about, if you don't understand what
Like,
that's like.
yeah.
And uh, being a CEO also, I mean, there's certainly privileges associated with it, but always remember, like, and there's a lot of psychology research about this as well, like group decision making. Most people are uncomfortable making decisions because a decision means you have something in writing that then can fall back on you. So
That's
keep in mind that the CEO has to be the tiebreaker of every decision. So if there's ever a decision that needs to be made that's not being made, like who do you think is making that? Whether
oh,
it's a guy or a girl, whoever it is,
that's right.
one person has to do it. That's the stress for me, is
Oh,
like when
yeah,
people are sitting in
yeah.
the meeting and they're arguing or discussing deeply, and people are just, then the silence hits, which I'm sure you've sat in there. What happens? They all look at Steve and
Yep.
they're wondering what Steve's going to say,
That's
right? And
right.
in that
That's right.
moment, you have to deliver a decision, right? And that you're hoping that you're right more than you're wrong.
And by the way, every single thing the company messes up, it ultimately comes back on you.
Of course, part of the job. Part of the job. Part of the
It
job.
ultimately comes back on the CEO. Now, you've been doing it for a couple of years now. You're getting more and more polished. You're learning as you move along. The one thing I wanted you to touch on is just the people piece. Yeah, the team aspect. And I know we're getting towards the back end here, but you said it earlier about the team on the bus, the right people on the bus and the right seats and the whole thing. It is just, it's like cliche, right? It's just more important than people realize because you can't do it all. And you said earlier, I have weaknesses. I'm not good at everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a good, humble CEO truly understands that. A humble
Yep.
CEO knows, like, okay, I'm pretty good at this. I suck at this, and I got to make sure that I got the right people.
Yep.
Um, Talk to me about finding the right people for your culture and team. What do you do to make sure that's happening? To make sure you get the right people on the bus? What are some tips you want to share?
First thing that I would share is something that I picked up naturally. Nobody ever told me to do this, but it's because of some curiosity. Dude, when I end a conversation, I don't care if I met you at the grocery store or a colleague introduced us or we meet professionally. If during the course of that conversation, if you've made me think and I think you're interesting, I will take the effort to develop a relationship there. And all that's doing is developing a bench of talent in the back of my head of like, oh, this person is good at this person's good at that. And obviously, when I think about the best hires I've ever made, I've known these people. And it's not because I've always worked with them sometimes, but it's also because I've met them and I think of them in that way. So it's like the old saying of like always be selling. Like I am always recruiting
Yeah,
as a
good move.
CEO,
Yes.
and that's an easy one that I think everybody should
Yeah.
do. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or not. Like surround yourself with better people, like genuinely, right? Like I think we would do more. And people ask like, what does that mean? So here's how I boil it down. If when you leave a conversation, you feel energized from that conversation, that's probably telling you something.
Yeah.
If you leave a conversation and you feel like, damn, like I need to take a nap, that's also probably telling you something. So there's dudes
So
and
good.
women that I will talk to where I'm like, I need to go lift weights. Like I'm just
So
jacked up. I
good.
want to go work
It's
out
so good.
physically. Those
Yeah.
are the people that I want to be around, right? Like,
Yeah.
and there's something there. So that for me is the obvious one.
Good move or good stuff. Great point about always be recruiting, at least thinking about it in the back of your mind, because turnover does happen. People, things happen in people's lives. They leave, they quit. I mean, it's going to happen. And so,
Yep,
you meet Sally and you're like, oh man, I got a good person in marketing, but boy, if my guy Bobby ever leaves, boy, I'm gonna call her. I mean, you just never know. So yeah,
totally.
great one. Real quick, give us the 3 minute elevator pitch for Wishlist. And by the way, for the listeners, it's enjoywishlist.com is the website, right? Pretty sure. Enjoy
Yep.
Wishlist. Yep. Give us the give us the pitch. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, wishlist works. We're in the B2B space, right? So we serve employees of organizations in the employee rewards and recognition space. So we are there. We believe in meaningful giving at meaningful moments. That's our mantra. That's what we believe in. What that means for us is, really for me, it's not rocket science. You're trying to create feelings of humanness for your workforce. So if you're giving a non-monetary recognition, a pat on the back to Steve in a meeting, or if you're giving him an anniversary gift or a birthday gift, that should be done in a meaningful way. So how do we know what makes Steve feel something as opposed to just something transactional? So
Mm, mm.
we play in that space. I think we do a couple of things very well, right? Along those lines, right? It's a tricky one to get right, but all we're thinking about, man, is what makes meaningful interactions in your personal life. Like if you've given your children, or if you've given your partner or a loved one a gift or a message that really resonated, what went into that, right? Like what was that process like, and how do you create that connectivity between a manager and an employee,
Mm.
or an executive and an employee, where sometimes, especially at larger organizations, that human connectedness just doesn't exist. So that's what the software is trying to attack.
And is it okay? So at Riderflex, if I was to use that at our recruiting firm here for our recruiters that work for us, it's a SaaS play for you, right? I'm guessing. Okay, and so I pay a monthly service or whatever per user or per how am
Depends
I?
on the program. It can be either per user or like a flat monthly fee. It kind of depends on the program. If people are touching it every day, we'll charge a PEPM. For other reward programs, like think if you want to run a real baseline program where you want to give gifts for people's birthdays and their work anniversaries, it would be a monthly fee.
I
So you
see.
pay for an admin fee, and then you pay for the gifts as they go out.
And will you just take care of it for me, or you ping me and say, hey, Steve, heads up, Sally's anniversary's coming. What do you want to give her? And then I send you a note.
No, so I mean it's funny. So I will use all the tech buzzwords like we are plug and play, we are fully automated. So like if you don't want to touch the software, man, you don't have to touch software. But we will send. So we pull in like org chart data,
Yeah,
and it's
good.
actually funny you bring that up because this is like one of those key variables that the efficacy of the program is dependent upon. We'll send you a notification beforehand and say, "Hey, Steve, like it's Sally's anniversary coming up next week. Do you want to write her a quick note or personalize this in any way?" If you don't, it'll still go out with a nice message, but that extra little umph and reminder keeps it top of mind for you and makes her feel like you've actually remembered.
What I would, for my personality, what I would prefer is like three little options, three little messages, pick the one I want, click this box, boom, yeah, boom, go.
I'll have to show you the software. We've got some stuff similar, not exactly the same as you provision, but something similar.
I thought two things. I know we're out of time here, but I thought two things when I was studying your software. Number one, CEOs are super busy, and a lot of times, as much as they want to stay on top of it, they screw up. They're like, it's Sally's anniversary yesterday. Oh shit, somebody said something in a meeting. Like, oh fuck, okay. So number one, you keep me from missing it.
Yep.
That's good, right?
Yep.
You're keeping me from missing it. And number two, you're keeping an even playing field, meaning everybody got the birthday note, not just these three, and that is just so. I mean, do you know how many times I've been involved in a situation where 6 months later somebody will come around? Well, yeah, we had the birthday party for Sally and
Yep.
Tom, but then we didn't have it for. Oh my God, yeah.
Totally. Like it's back to your point earlier about who you're taking to lunch, right? So now
Yeah.
you're taking everybody to lunch. So yeah.
Enjoywishlist.com. Great stuff, Skylar. I mean, really appreciate you sharing. Congratulations on your career and your journey so far. You still got a long way to go, my man. You're just getting started. You're just
Yeah,
getting
I'm just getting
started.
started. There's more ahead. But no, I appreciate it, Steve. Thanks for having me on, man. That was a great
Yeah.
conversation. I appreciate it.